Well, let's revisit it later. So this one is another interesting batch of things. Now, I know folks here in the room probably wouldn't say that, hey, I got PCI, I got this SAQ submitted to my acquirer, I'm secure. Now, that's not really something that would cross our minds here, but there are plenty of people who would actually think like that. And more important, their bosses would think like that. And so, to me, a lot of people would come to me and say, well, in our organization, my management is telling me to only do what's in PCI and to ignore everything else. And the most blatant example I've seen was where implementation of PCI-inspired password policy was prioritized higher than the response to a live, ongoing data theft incident. Not card data theft, mind you, but some other kind of data theft. So the manager told the security analyst to go fix the password policy while their secondary website was basically being compromised. To me, that was the most blatant example of just do PCI, ignore the rest, even if it's staring in your face and seem to be making a bad impact on your environment. Now, I don't know what was going on through the mind of that manager, but that kind of stuff happens, and that's not a very useful mindset because it not only makes PCI not equal security, it makes PCI the opposite of security, which is quite a harmful way to even think about the whole mess. And clearly along the same line, and that will be an ongoing theme, if you think maintaining PCI is too hard, you go to the other extreme. You only remember it once a quarter when you need to submit a report or to do anything of that sort, which is clearly PCI inspired. When your acquirer calls you about a new PCI fee, they want to levy on you or something of that sort. So this is usually means that PCI wasn't internalized. It was kind of seen as still something falling from the sky and hitting you in the head, not something that is here, we have to accept it and deal with it. And this is, again, this is where there's a high risk of us preaching to the choir and saying, focus on doing security in PCI, but the most useful thing is to remember the thing from a previous slide about dual use, is that if you don't agree with a particular PCI provision, if you think you can do things better, then that's fine. Just document it as build a case that it's a compensating control. I mean, yesterday I had a chat with somebody who is, I don't think he's in the room, about virtualization, which is a known flashpoint in PCI. And he said, well, we know it's a flashpoint. We're going to go about it like this. We're going to build some security infrastructure. We're going to document it. We're going to build the best shot we can when the QSA shows up that virtualization is acceptable under those circumstances. And here's a 10-page document which describes the real architecture built around virtualization to be secure and compliant. And to be honest, I think they would do just fine with their QSA. So that type of stuff just falls into the balancing and sort of doing the dual use. And yes, there's a burden that you have to document it, but there are there's dual use even for documenting controls. Sometimes you want to prove it to your senior management want to prove it to the board, or in the very worst case, you might have to use it to prove to the brand or to the qualified incident response assessor after the breach that you have paid attention to the whole thing. And again, floor not the ceiling theme is another useful reminder here. Go ahead. Okay. Truth in PCI. This is gonna get a little philosophical and actually scary. Now, some of us might have been taught when we were children that lying is just not a good idea. Or maybe lying is a good idea only under very limited circumstances like white lies, whatever else. So PCI has this unique connection to lying. People lie on their self-assessment forms. People lie to QSAs. People lie to their acquirers. And sometimes, which is the bizarre part, even the IT team would lie to their senior management about their compliance status. And I was about to say that sometimes IT would misrepresent the compliance status to management by saying we are compliant. But sometimes, as Branden pointed out, they would lie that they're not compliant to get the budget for those new routers. I mean, people need routers, right? So what's the way to get routers? Oh, well, VeriSign told us that we need routers.
That happened to me, yeah.
Because those routers we have are they're no good PCI-wide. I mean, see, look at them. I mean, no.
So has anybody ever done that? Or if as Q says a couple in here, have you ever had that situation where the CISO comes in and says, what the hell is this $9 million I have to spend that you said somebody had to spend? That happened to me. So it's not fun when that happens.
Yeah. And at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Branden for the continuation of the show.
I'm going to take the presenter.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it there.
It's useful.
Ah, yes, it is. So the whole idea here is that, I talked about this earlier, the QSA and the merchant or service provider, it's a partnership. If you treat it like an auditor, you're going to get audit-like results, and it's not going to be helpful. Misrepresenting things is never a good thing. Now, I understand that, and I'm going to turn around. I'm sure that there's some people who maybe have done this. Raise your hand if you've ever had to lie about something like this. But the issue is that it's not a long-term solution. It doesn't really help you. And if there's politics involved, I know it can be a problem. I know that. I've had to help navigate these politics. And it's really about trying to find the right way to position the message to get what you need to get done. If you are going to get fired because you told somebody that they were not compliant, you go to your manager and say, oh man, we didn't pass. If you get fired for that, you're working at the wrong company. Because when it actually, well, not anymore, right? You were working for the wrong company. Because when the bad stuff happens, guess who gets to be the person to stand up because it happened on your watch? It's going to be you. You're going to be the guy. So there's an appropriate way to do it. You don't want to run in and say, hey, CFO, dude, you cut me that check for $7 million. It's not going to get you anywhere, but you got to do it right. So you want to work with a good QSA to get an objective assessment. You really want it to be, get something valid. Now keep in mind, because it's a partnership, if you're expecting your QSA to find all of your problems, I'm guessing your assessments are going to be somewhere in the multi-million-dollar range, right? No, you pay what, 30 grand, 60 grand? What do you think you're going to get for $30,000 or $60,000? 3 to 6 man weeks. What do you think you're going to get? You're not going to get that talk to everybody out there. It's just not possible. So it's both, right? We're going to look at samples. We're going to try to hit all the areas. And then it's up to you the rest of the time to make sure that stuff's happening. And then glance at PCI. Think risk to data, then implement. And this is kind of a, you have to understand that they do allow for a risk-based approach. Now, that is a slippery slope because the council will tell you, you can use a risk-based approach. Well, what does that mean? How do I calculate that? Where's my watermark? Give me a formula. And I always that's usually me talking to the council. I'm like, it's a great idea, Bob, risk-based approach. But what's risky to me may not be risky to Michelle. How are we supposed to fix this? But it really is, you got to use some common sense. If you have a server that you've set up for a charity drive, and you have, there's maybe 100 cards that have passed through that machine, then maybe you can get away with some stuff. But just remember that you're still responsible if there's a breach. So this is a fun one. So I'm going to try to endear myself to you guys a little bit, be a little vulnerable for a second. So I told you I was a QSA, right? Today I'm currently not. I've lapsed. But at one point in my life I was a QSA. I gave a presentation about the mistakes that QSAs make and kind of wrap some of these in here. Okay, now, I'm not just like making stuff up. I've made some of these mistakes. I've been that guy, or I've seen it happen. Sometimes guys have reported to me. Not a proud moment, but something that's important. QSA acts like a black hat security hacker. Who in here has seen somebody walk up to you and say, PCI is a load of garbage. It's not going to protect against this type of attack? Like around wireless, maybe. You're telling me quarterly walking around my stores quarterly is going to stop a hacker from getting in? Come on. Right? PCI is that floor. It's the baseline. If you're requiring on PCI to make yourself secure, you're really missing the point. The QSA believes PCI is common sense. What's common sense to me, what's common sense to you is going to be different. We have different backgrounds, different ways we approach stuff. PCI is not common sense. It's complicated. It's hard. There's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of opportunities for something to go wrong, right? Something really small that could cause a breach. There's a lot of requirements in there. Now, this is my favorite one. Okay, so I'm guilty of the top one. I did the top one. I walked into a customer at a wireless point of sale, said, you really need to have wireless IPS on this. I said, standard doesn't say that. Where does it say that in the standard? And I kind of tuck my tail between my legs and, flip through it and say, oh, crap. It doesn't say it. You're right. But really, you should. You should have that. So here, the QSA here is a trainer wrong. Had a situation with one of my guys. He was sitting in the training class. QSAs have to go to training every year. Now it's CBT. It's computer-based. But before this year, he actually had to fly everybody and go sit and listen to a guy talk for 2 hours for a day on PCI. It's really exciting stuff. So he says, the trainer says something to the effect of, remember when we went to PCI 1.2, that 500,000 number floor went away? Does anybody not know what I'm talking about? It's okay to raise your hand because I'll explain it. Okay, the PCI 500,000 PCI floor used to, you could